Well, they never said it would happen. They never thought it could be done, but we're back. And when I say we, I just mean me. It is the Brownbare Vodcast. That's right, I've only gone and given it a name as well. So, welcome everybody. This is the first podcast, video podcast, whatever it was once called, that I'm doing for a hell of a long time. And the reason why is that since the last time I was on your little screens or in your ears, the team's grown. I've kind of been made sort of half redundant, and I was bothering a lot of people. So they said, look, mate, just get into a studio, pretend that you've got an audience and a bit of a following, do a bit of a podcast, and keep yourself out of trouble. So here I am, and lucky you, this is the first episode of 2022. So as you can see, I am in a swanky new studio with cameras everywhere and soundproofing and all this magnificent technology around me. And that is thanks to the work of the Chaos Group, who we are partnering with to produce these delightful little vodcasts for you. So the production level has gone up. Hopefully the frequency will go up. There might even be a bit of structure to these vodcasts this time. So one of the big stories of this week is, of course, Oatly and the slapped wrist it's got from the Advertising Standards Authority. Now, this is after over 100 odd complaints in response to some of the advertising that Oatly's been putting out, either over Facebook or Twitter or some of its digital advertising platforms, but also a TV ad, where Oatly has made comparisons around the carbon footprint, essentially saying, and this is what I'm going to sort of read off, that the dairy and meat industries emit more CO2 than all the world's planes, trains, cars, boats, etc. combined. The idea being that the message that Oatly's getting out there is that, go vegan and you're doing a considerable amount to save the planet. Now, what the Advertising Standards Authority has taken umbrage with is that actually what Oatly is claiming, or what Oatly's comparison is not quite factually correct. In fact, it wasn't taking in the full supply chain, the life cycle of those industries. And as such, the claim that it was making, the general sort of claim that it was making, just didn't hold tight. It didn't hold up with enough evidence. And this is what essentially the ASA has said Oatly needs to rectify. Oatly in response has said, we are a science-based organisation, and that is exactly what we're going to go ahead and do. And we're going to make sure that the claims going forward are going to be evidence-based. What does this mean for our magnificent industry? Well, the fact is, for many years, let's face it, PRs, advertisers, communicators as a whole have been getting away with making a lot of claims without a lot of evidence. And I think this year they're going to start to come unstuck. This is actually a really important step. So there has been an awful lot of fairly dubious claims made around sustainability. And the fact is, a lot of these claims are made with very, very little knowledge behind them and very, very little evidence. And that has rightly got to stop. And as we know, the Competition and Markets Authority, the CMA, last year made it very, very clear that it was going to be coming after organisations, brands, marketers that were making very, very dubious claims, greenwashing, essentially, making very dubious claims around sustainability. If you didn't have the evidence to back up what you were saying, they were going to come after you. And their big target is, of course, fast fashion. And I think this is really, really important for us as an industry to really take on board. I genuinely think that now is the time that we have got to get real about the genuine actions that people can take, the genuine things that organisations can do in order to reduce their carbon footprint, rather than try and sell this falsehood that if you buy a 20% organic cotton t-shirt, you're somehow reducing the 51 billion tonnes of carbon emissions. This has to be a good thing for us. We have to get more comfortable with stats, with evidence, with facts. And to be honest with you, we need to put in a little bit more hard work before we go into a campaign. And this is what the Oatly scenario is really telling us. Now, the more sceptical of us will be quite clear on the fact that actually this is the sort of news that Oatly absolutely loves. In fact, some could potentially argue that Oatly have kind of gone ahead and done this on purpose, knowing full well they're going to get a slap wrist. Let's face it, they're in all of the nationals and they've got an opportunity to crow about the fact that if you go vegan or if you drink and Oatly water, you're going to have an improved impact on carbon emissions and a reduced footprint on the planet. Some would say that they've done this on purpose. I'm not quite sure. What I would say is that it is a big wake-up call for us. We're in January 2022, and the first kind of real sign that things are changing has already happened. What are the steps you have to go to if you're an organisation or a marketer looking to go out there with a set of messaging, making some green claims, making some sustainability claims? What are the things that you have to be wary of? Well, helpfully, the CMA has outlined 15 steps that you need to go through in order to understand whether or not you are putting out a truly authentic set of communications. But ultimately, what it boils down to is really the first few steps. And I'm going to read them out. That the claim is accurate and clear for all to understand. I mean, that's kind of all of the steps in one, I think. But here's number 2, which I think is absolutely crucial. That there's up-to-date, credible evidence to show that the green claim is true. Up-to-date, credible evidence. And this is where it comes onto the PR professional, onto the comms professional, onto the creative. We need to be asking for that up-to-date, clear evidence before we piss off and start making a creative campaign. Before we start getting our pencils out and our sticky notes out and making a big creative session, let's pause for a moment and ask that boss or that brand or that client, do we have some up-to-date, clear evidence that supports the claim that you want us to go ahead and campaign about? And it's this bit which I think it needs to be crystallised in our psyche. Now, a report was commissioned by the Changing Markets Foundation, and this report found that as many as 59% of the green or sustainability claims made by fashion brands in the European and UK markets were kind of greenwashing. And actually, one of those brands, breaks my fucking heart, was Patagonia. And this is where it gets really interesting. Of course, there was a huge uproar as to some of the claims that, for example, H&M was making, which were dubious at best and laughable at worst. But if you delve deeper into some of the claims that some of these more, I suppose, sustainable brands were making, such as Patagonia, and actually dug into, for example, the use of synthetic fabrics within their clothing. And there was a real issue with the fact that even the most heralded B Corp on the planet was not necessarily being that transparent about where and what it was using in its products. So there is, I guess, this sense that it could go really too far one way, and that actually we're not going to be able to make any form of claim, because the deeper you dig, the more likely you're to find one or two faults or issues that then get blown up out of proportion. But on the whole, it's a fairly positive thing. Because for us, before we go off into our mad creative worlds, what we need to do is pause, ask for evidence, scrutinise that detail, and then we can make a call as to whether or not we should be going live with that campaign. And that, for me, is a deeply positive thing for our industry to do. So, in summary, Oatly, you naughty little OT buggers. But for the industry, the creative industry, for the marketing industry, for the advertising world, take note. Any claim that is made without evidence will quite likely be dismissed without evidence as well. So, from naughty oat milk through to delicious salty popcorn, my campaign that I have absolutely loved over the last couple of weeks, and it's not even a campaign, it's just creative newsjacking, is what came out of KP Snacks. So they're here for the drama. Newsjack was so elegantly, beautifully done. Well, in the midst, in the depths of things like Partygate and Boris Johnson bullshit, what better thing for a brand like KP Snacks and its popcorn brands, its Butterkist brands to do than to roll up an advertising truck with people scoffing popcorn featured on it, saying, here for the drama. Absolutely beautifully timed. There was loads of press around that place anyways. Turning up outside Downing Street was inspired. Handing out loads of product for people to enjoy. It was just such a beautifully timed stunt. It had the brand activism-y elements that, of course, I'm going to love. And the fact that it was done so rapidly, it was just creatively well thought out and executed rapidly. And that's the type of stuff which is definitely going to be getting cut through this year, especially when we've got the backdrop of this absolute farce of a government that is going to allow us to do these sorts of things more creatively, get into their face, poke a little bit of fun at them. I'd love to see more brands step up above the parapet and do some of that as well. You can read a little article on PR Week around how this campaign came together. And actually, I think it was Kate Hill, who's their assistant brand manager at Butterkist, talked about the idea of unmissable moments. And what a great phrase, unmissable moments. Being able to sort of jump into that moment, create something delightful, put a wry smile on the face of the British public at a moment where we absolutely needed it. Get the brand out there, get a shed load of product out there. Unmissable moments, it's where it's at, and that is a big round of applause. Finally, I said I'd round this vodcast up with a tip or a trick or some sort of insight. I was on the PRCA 2022 Trends event. That's right, I'm that fucking important. Talking about the trends that I see coming up in the coming year. And one of the things that I talked about then, and I'm going to have a little bit of a chat about now, is this idea of vulnerability. Being a vulnerable leader or being a vulnerable brand, in fact. Now, I've had a lot of discussions, even a bit of training around this with a chap who I work with called Floyd Woodrow. Extraordinary person, and he leads the Compass for Life Foundation. I urge you guys to go and take a look. He does leadership training courses as well. Phenomenal human being. But he brought to life this idea of vulnerability and why it's so important. And actually, I think vulnerability is going to be a trait that we see exist within brand campaigns in 2022. This is so important for us as creatives and as brand managers or PR executives to understand the importance of why vulnerability in our brand messaging, in the way that we communicate as brands, is actually going to help to build trust. So first and foremost, vulnerability is not weaknesses or things such as that. What it is honesty. It's the sense that you are honest about not necessarily failures, but the opportunity that is ahead of you, the steps that you're going to have to take to get there, and the fact that you're on a journey of improvement. So what do I mean by that? I think for the last few decades, brands have tried to present themselves as the perfect finished article, and they're not, and they shouldn't be, because perfection is not a human trait. What perfection is an ethereal thing that we try and aspire to, and it actually makes us fucking miserable. Instead, what makes us much more human is a sense of vulnerability. It's this idea that brands accept the fact that they're not perfect, that there's the little imperfections and the little insecurities, and the odd fuck up that actually makes them quite human. As creatives, as PRs, as communicators, we should absolutely be leaning into this. The role of vulnerability in communications, in PR, in comms, in brand, is to say, as an organisation, I am on this epic journey and I'm going to get a heap of things wrong. But importantly, I'm going to tell you when things go wrong. I'm going to keep you in the loop. I'm not going to hide away from it. I'm not going to pretend to show strength or courage. I'm going to lay out the roadmap that we're on. And as a brand, I'm going to take you on the journey with me, warts and all. We're going to see more campaigns, more creative, be created from a place of vulnerability than necessarily a place of false strength and confidence. And I think that's going to be really powerful this year, especially in the backdrop of a bunch of people who refuse to show any sense of vulnerability. So, as communicators, as PRs, as creatives, I urge you, go ahead and take a look at how you can make your brands that you're working with more vulnerable this year. How you can communicate in a more human, transparent, open, aggressively honest level. Because I guarantee you'll start to see that sentiment, that trust build up amongst your target audience. So that's a wrap. That's it. That's your first podcast since my glorious return. I'll try and do another one. I think I definitely will, because I quite enjoy it. And this is a swanky, cool little studio, and they make me tea here as well, which is fabulous. Once again, a big shout out to the Chaos crew. You've been awesome in bringing this together for me. And I will hopefully be speaking with you guys in a couple of weeks. Please do like and follow and subscribe and all that shit. It will be magnificent. I can tell my mum about it. Much love to you all. Take care.